We are very glad to be here. My name is Paula Marquez. I'm the head of unit, who in the Commission is in charge of renewable energy policy. And when it comes to this sector, what I would like to say is that we have in Europe a very ambitious renewables policy. So we have set targets, binding targets per country and overall EU for 2020. And we are in good track to achieve these targets by 2020. We are nowadays, or 2014 data, have confirmed that we are over 15% of renewables shares, so we're quite well off. And more than that, we are already working in order to prepare for the post-2020. So we are currently very busy in preparing the next stage legislation that will provide triggering mechanisms for achieving an ambitious target for 2030, which the member states, the 28 EU member states, have agreed that has to be minimum 27% of final energy. So this is where we stand, and I'd like to also to add that events like this are very important also for policy setting. And as you know, for Europe, we have estimated that a minimum of 27% renewables share means minimum of 50% of renewables electricity. So this is something that represents a challenge for the current systems, and this is why the European Union has decided to redesign the market, the power market. This is a major work that is also ongoing, and we will be tabling, the Commission will be tabling concrete legislative proposals to redesign the power market in order that it is more suitable for renewables, and also a new renewable energy directive later this year. So we have today here an outstanding panel of speakers, and we have a few hours to learn from them, to learn from their experiences that relate to technology but also policy. And without further ado, I would like to firstly give the floor to the EU ambassador, Mr. Patrice. He's our ambassador, so the ambassador of the EU here in the Emirates, and he will be giving some introductory remarks. Please.
Okay, it's working, yes. Good afternoon to all of you. I see the room is full. I'm very pleased of that. Dear colleagues, it's really a pleasure to speak today on behalf of the Director General for Energy, Mr. Dominique Ristori, who could not be here today. He just left yesterday. The European Commission, as you know, is attaching paramount importance to the fast deployment of renewable energy. At the end of this year, Commissioner Arias Cañete will table decisive new legislative proposals, both on a new electricity market for the EU and on a new renewable energy framework for post-2020. Now, the increasing share of variable renewable electricity presents new challenges, while at the same time, security of supply is growing in importance. System security is indeed essential to maintaining the stability of the electricity system. From this perspective, the integration of wind and solar power raises a number of challenges because their output is weather-related and therefore variable and less predictable. The International Energy Agency in 2014 has concluded that reaching high shares of wind and solar power is technically feasible. Wind power already constitutes 40% of Denmark's generation mix, while in Spain, wind and solar power together constitute 1/3 of the generation mix as of 2014. This is already comparable to decarbonization scenarios, and thus shows that solutions are within reach. Both Denmark and Spain have developed flexible energy systems to integrate the increasing share of variable renewable electricity. And higher flexibility is indeed needed to accommodate weather-dependent outputs. Technical flexibility can come from all elements of the energy system in combination, including demand, networks, storage, conventional generation, and wind and solar power themselves. Increasing flexibility requires a more profound transformation of the power system, and in the long term, the power system has to be reoptimized. The more wind and solar power in the system, the less baseload power is needed. Conventional gas plant capacity will be needed in the long term, but will not run or will run at a lower output except at times when wind and solar outputs are low. How to get the right investments through this transformation is the key question, where one concern is that electricity markets are inherently volatile, while low-carbon technologies and flexible storage solutions may have high upfront fixed costs. We therefore believe in flexibility options to mature through market innovation, responding to energy prices. Energy storage is, in this context, one of the important sources of flexibility in the energy system, contributing to the needed increased flexibility and security. Energy storage is in many ways the ideal form of flexibility that fills all the need of the future energy system. But it is important to remember that flexibility can come from a range of sources, as I said before, demand, networks, conventional generation, and so on. We have gathered today an outstanding set of experts that will report on their technologies, the markets they are covering, and we'll end with the World Energy Council report, the outcome of their recent studies. We have a joint vested interest to develop energy storage solutions. I have no doubt our exchanges will positively contribute to that effort. Let me conclude saying that, as was said once by an American computer scientist, Alan Kay, the best way to predict the future is to invent it. And I think that in this week we are doing that. So it's very important, your work. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, and let's move ahead and I'll walk through the program. We have planned 2 sessions for this afternoon, and let's start with the first, where we'll be looking at flexibility needs in the new energy system. And for that, we have 2 keynote speakers, Mr. Massimo Bertoncini to start, who is the Director of European Research and Development Projects at INGRID project in particular. So he's leading on corporate activity on innovation, on smart energy and green IT. And he's a director, actually, of INGRID, which is high-capacity hydrogen-based green energy storage solution for grid balancing. So I would like to invite Mr. Bertoncini to take the floor and tell us about the value of European projects for the promotion of storage solutions.
Thank you. Good afternoon to everybody. Thanks to European Commission. Thanks to Paola for giving me the opportunity just to illustrate the progress of this relevant project, which has been funded by European Commission a couple of years ago. And I will try just to make some particular comments on the reason why energy storage, as underlined already by the ambassador, it's extremely relevant. In particular, we strongly believe that there are some competing technologies which are fighting one each other in order just to demonstrate that they are viable for providing electricity network and energy network with the requested flexibility level, which is the target of our first session of this workshop. So let's try to introduce our project. My name is Massimo Bertoncini, and I'm actually the director of European R&D and Innovation Project at Engineering Ingegneria Informatica. And engineering is a global ICT service and technology provider headquartered in Rome, Italy, but with different premises. One in Sao Paulo, Brazil, one in Brussels, the other major customer and premise all over the world. And what is important for us is now just to give an insight of our project and demonstrate how this kind of project would be relevant thanks to European Commission involvement and push action just to favor, to nurture innovation, the real-life innovation. This is our project identity card and consortium. You can have a look on the different typology of partners which have been involved. Beyond us, you can have industrial players like beyond us, like technology component providers, storage technology providers like Hydrogenix and McPhee, but we have above all end users like the largest utility power distribution operator in Italy, the Enel Corporation. And here we can have a look on how our consortium is going to cover all the value chain requested to provide all the necessary know-how for demonstrating for this innovative solutions. And what I would like just to underline is that we have found a fertile ground for demonstrating these technologies in South Italy, which most of you should know that is a very popular, dense area in terms of renewable energy generation plant, both winds and sun. Let's have a look at what are the objectives of this and the main challenges of these EU-funded projects. Ingrid has started with aiming at demonstrating both technical and economical feasibility for decentralized solid hydrogen energy storage hub, aiming at supporting the optimized operation of a multi-utility system. So the vision which we have in mind is just to achieve system-level efficiency, so not give a look and not to be limited to achieve progress in the operation at level of individual infrastructure or networks like gas grid or electricity grids, but just to have within reach ambitious goals in particular for determine how this kind of combined solution would be could be achieving an overall economic attractiveness, financial viability in the next years. So basically our challenge was just to combine innovative technology components, in particular ICT for real-time monitoring and automated control with solid-state hydrogen energy storage in order to effectively balance power demand and supply and above all reducing the curtailment. That is to say, for those of one who are not aware of this, the forced shutdown of the generation, intermittent generation, renewable energy generation plant due to the technical constraint occurring just to the power networks operations. Having said that, the background was, as I mentioned before, just the addressing and trying to, as much as possible, to reduce this curtailing of renewable energy source. And in that respect, hydrogen storage, like other technologies, I have to say, when it's coupled with distributed renewable energy generation and eventually on-site hydrogen use or nearby transportation for industrial purpose or other purpose, would be able just to enable to prepare the ground for optimal operation of multi-utility systems. The vision, even I heard in a very favorable way, that this kind of workshop would be able just to set the scene for the next Horizon project or for the next European Commission programs. In that respect, probably this kind of project will be helpful for driving just for guiding all of us just to have in mind one multi-utility vision which connects which makes the concept of the season reachable within the connected operation of different utilities which have been able to be interconnected to operate in a simultaneous way one each other. So Ingrid basically is addressing the main smart energy system challenges. So you can see from this image, we are addressing the decentralization, increasing the decentralization of energy management and power production. And above all, on your right, you can see the major challenges which are addressing, that is to say, the integration of different energy carriers. In our case, will be electricity versus hydrogen value chain, which could be considered as an energy carrier to connect with the gas grids or with even sustainable transportation, alternative mobility, hydrogen-based mobility. So why explicitly, Ingrid, in particular, hydrogen energy storage? The main reason why is that hydrogen is normally able just to provide a high level of flexibility, so it will be able to accommodate different requirements in terms of storage application, ranging from hours to even seasonal level application. So in that respect, we could tell that hydrogen could be considered as an extremely versatile medium for energy storage technologies. And in particular, hydrogen is a good option just to operate this interconnected management of formerly disconnected network or utility network operation, in particular electricity, gas, and mobility, for instance. In these figures, you can have a look on the concept which we are going to demonstrate. So in this concept, you can have a look on the boundaries of our systems. In the central pink area, you can see the basic blocks, which is we call energy management systems. Energy management systems is able to supervise when you can have a surplus of electricity which cannot be, due to technical constraint, cannot be transported by the network through the substation. In our case, will be the primary substation interfacing medium versus high voltage level. And you can have different technology components like electrolyzer, solid state hydrogen storage, and even a fuel cell for backing hydrogens to electricity, while you can see even the possibility for feeding up with the hydrogen value chain. For instance, you can have hydrogen value merchant or even alternative mobility, like cars propelled with the hydrogen, of the possibility for injecting in the gas grid, either directly hydrogen within certain constraint, or otherwise make use of some surplus nearby located of carbon dioxide just to generate methane and directly inject into the gas grid. So that's the main concept which we are working on and which we are going to demonstrate. And energy management system will be operated through different optimization policies. We are going to test a number of these, including networks-driven management optimization or even generation optimization management. So that is something which will be investigated in the next months when the construction site will be ready in spring this year. And this is just to give a look of the located in the demonstration site in southern Italy, in Puglia, in Troia Foggia, which is the second largest area in which wind is stronger in Italy. And there is even a lot of sun with a lot of PV panels. And you can imagine how much difficulty in a countryside area where the network is not strong enough would be to transport the not used electricity through the primary substation. And you can have a look here on the demonstration setting. So the nominal power electrolyzer is 1.2 megawatt. But what I would like to point out is that In the demonstration site, the in-grid systems, as you can see from the red line, is able just to support, to cut off the not transportable electricity, which you can see from the blue line. So it's a small portion of the electricity will be not transported, and in that respect, this surplus will be used for operating the electrolyzer for producing hydrogens. You can see then the system layout that we have been carefully designed. We are in the final step of the commissioning, waited for the final authorization from the local authorities. In my final part of the presentation, I would like just to give an insight on our business model validation, because as you could imagine, storage is one of the emerging technologies, but on the other way around, for the time being, despite there have been in the last years further reduction of the capex, so of the capital costs, it is extremely difficult for the time being just to understand, to see to what extent storage technologies could gain financial benefit for who operates this. In that respect, our business model has been based on building upon the combination of different driver requirements. For instance, with willing to own, so with willing to operate, but with willing to own even the storage plant, the storage hub. And above all, what we did is just to make some extensive simulation for understanding in which condition this plant, the storage plant, could becoming even financial viable, considering, for instance, multi-service aggregation model. In jargon, we call this stacking for different reward, because you can have reward for providing service from the electrolyzer, combined with the reward for providing system service to the low voltage branch of the network, for instance, just to the fuel cell. And our business model is a multi-value business model, which is going to combine storage service deployed in a regulated market for DSO. It is clear that for the time being, these are not allowed within regulatory constraints, but it seems that there are some movements at level of DSOs. Maybe TSO, of course, would not be so much agreed, but from the analysis and from other projects in which I'm personally involved, it seems that this kind of technologies, so storage service, could be even successfully deployed for generating a local balancing market for DSO in some specific conditions. So stacking and adding to this stream of business the possibility for providing a storage service for energy management in the free deregulated market would be adding up some reward streams which would be complementing the former one. In that respect, we identified even within this category different services, like services for RES generators to avoid the fluctuation, so to have a firm generation diagram, service deploying eventually along the hydrogen value chain to the hydrogen market, so natural gas grid or hydrogen used as feedstock for other industrial purpose. And in that respect, our model will be consisting of operating this in-grid hub as a third-party independent storage service operator within a merchant ownership model. And in that respect, the revenue source which we calculated is an effective combination of DSO tailored service provisioning revenues, including, for instance, the balancing demand and supply and limiting renewable feed-in from the side of electrolyzer, that is to say at medium voltage level, with peak shaving at low voltage level from the side of the fuel cell. Combining with the wholesale electricity traders like arbitrage, with the firming power provisioning tailored just to RES generation plant, not to forget that just to make use of the hydrogen feedstock selling. So just to give a look to these figures in order to understand how we combine along one typical average day the way of working of controlling the storage, you can have on the top figures the water electrolytes working at medium voltage level. You can combine just the arbitrage with the congestion relief during the day, while that could be summed up with the fuel cell low level, which could be working for reactive power provisioning and for peak shaving and for arbitrage. So combining and summing up all this type of services, that could be a reduced time for investment, which, of course, that should be validated, but it will be falling within the 5 years, which is more or less, of course, with the lowering of the equipment cost, that could be fairly reduced. But even with this level of cost for technology components, we believe that could be even not too bad. Okay, having said that, let's come to some preliminary conclusion. Of course, this simulation, this validation will be from the spring this year, followed up with concrete demonstration on the real life, on the field validation sites. All of us know that hydrogen energy storage shows a low overall efficiency due to the different chemical transformation. So in the base case, 23–25%. And this is something which the large majority of people tell that it is the major problems characterizing the hydrogen energy storage. On the other way around, anyway, this is exactly the framework within which we considering the hydrogen energy storage. That could be a good possibility or eventually acceptable business perspective considering multiple value propositions, so multiple business model, in which we are going just to provide even system service or other type of service to different stakeholders interested to be provided with storage services. And another preliminary conclusion would be that reducing this kind of hydrogen energy storage would be able just to support the reduction of the curtailment, which is a very good way for maximizing the societal investment, because at the very end of the day, this investment in renewable energy plants has been carried out making use of public money or money from all the citizens. That is something which we need to maximize. And this project has been able just to set in the scene to pave the way for integrated multi-utility. So how should be the utility of the future, integrating different energy carrier, integrating a technical level, if you want. Even if I have to say that there are some storage service drawbacks which are under analysis even by European Commission and worldwide agencies, like it's the last slide, but like the fact that storage service rewarding are not clear, and for the time being, storage usually is rewarded through the energy which is stored, but not for not understanding and giving real value to the service itself which is provided. Last slide is from best practice from EU Ingrid project. As an overall conclusion, European Commission is giving us some contribution for allowing just to demonstrate this, and in company-wise and as a citizen of the European Commission thinks that this is an important, a fundamental asset in order just to provide, to contribute just to the technology, to the innovative technology demonstration taking place really into the market. And we strongly believe that this kind of technology could be even an ideal candidate to work in off-grid decentralized scenarios, like in countries richer in sun, like here, like in Arab countries and in other countries, Since you can imagine that with a slightly different configuration, we can have some kind of islanded microgrid in which that could be used for considering for using the surplus of electricity generated by PV and to generate hydrogen and back into electricity. Okay, this is my conclusion. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bertoncini, for your very interesting presentation on this EU-supported demonstration project, and in particular for the interesting business case that you have presented. I would now like to invite Mr. Ahmed El Ebrahim, who is the Chief Executive Officer of GCC Interconnection Authority. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Paula. First of all, I'd like to thank the European Commission for giving me the chance to share with you some of our perspectives here in the GCC regarding energy storage. First of all, I'm not an expert on energy storage, so I'll be just talking about our perspective in the GCC from a system operator point of view on why do we need storage and flexibility. First of all, I thought I'll start with giving you some idea about who is the GCCIA. We are the super grid operator of the GCC. We have a 400 kV super grid that interconnects the 6 member states of GCC. That's our building there. You can see it signifies 6 elements, which reflect the 6 GCC member states. We are a joint stock company owned by the 6 GCC states, and we have been established since 2001, so we're around 15 years old now. The purpose of creating the GCC Interconnection Authority was, first of all, to establish a supergrid to interconnect the GCC power grids. Secondly, to operate and develop the supergrid, so we own and we operate our grid. We're responsible for it. And thirdly, to establish the GCC electricity market, which is our main focus in the coming years. And that shows some of the technologies that we have installed to enable the connectivity of the GCC member states. One of them is an HVDC back-to-back station, which converts the frequency between the Saudi Arabia 60 Hz system and the rest of the GCC member states operating at 50 Hz. Now, our mission, as we see it, started with just establishing the GCC interconnection, which have been concluded in 2011. Since 2011, we had the 6 states, or the 6 grids of the GCC working as one grid, basically exchanging power through the supergrid of the GCCIA. Now, our focus is mainly in creating the GCC power market to have an effective, economic-based power trading platform that enables the exchange of energy on commercial basis between the member states, which promotes efficiency. And on the long term, we're looking to connect beyond the GCC region. Maybe someday one of our long-term vision is to reach up to Europe and maybe exchange some energy during the different season. Between summer and winter, we have our peaks in the summer, while Europe have their peaks in the winter, and it makes good sense to exchange with different regions. And similarly, we're looking to connect to other regions in Asia and in Africa for the same reason. And that would be also some of our projects that we are studying during this year. Now, the GCC interconnector has been a major transition in the GCC power sector. For the first time, these 6, I would say, big power grids have been operated in interconnected mode. They used to be just isolated systems. And since we started from scratch, the idea was, why not establish a backbone instead of having a neighbor-to-neighbor interconnection like how interconnections developed in Europe. And that proved to have some advantages that we have seen during our establishment. Now, we started operating in 2009. We connected 4 member states. And then by 2011, we had all the 6 member states operating in interconnected mode. During that time, you've seen a progressive utilization of the grid. Started very low, and then we are now having more than 900,000 megawatt hours of exchanges every year. And basically, these are exchanges in kind, while what we are also aiming to create is more of a commercial and an economic power trade platform. The GCC power sector, of course, is characterized by very high growth rates. Last year alone, we had around 10% average growth in the GCC power systems. That's quite high, actually. And if we look at on average, the last 10 years from 2003 to 2013, the range of increase in the power generation and the power demand was between 5 to 12%, and it differs from country to country. And what's expected in the coming years until 2020 is a very high growth rate also, which is between 4 to 9%. And that all puts lots of stress, of course, and on the power grids to continue developing new sources of energy. And that is really one of the challenges that we have to deal with. Secondly, now the GCC member states, having realized this, also realize that we cannot just continue building the same conventional power plants, which is basically fossil fuel. Now, more than 95 or 98% of our power generation is based on gas. And there are some stations that utilize even crude oil or heavy fuel oil for peaking. So this reliance on fossil fuel and basically on gas is not sustainable. And that's why all the GCC member states now are moving towards targets for establishing sustainable energy resources. Renewable energy targets have been set in all the member states. Some of them are very aggressive. This I take from the latest IRENA report in 2015, which shows that there are very good targets, I would say, and challenging targets for the GCC member states. We start, for instance, for Abu Dhabi, they have 7% of the capacity by 2020, while Dubai is setting 15% by 2030. We can see something similar. Saudi Arabia is targeting about 24 gigawatts of renewables by 2022 and about 54 gigawatts by 2032. Now, these are huge targets, and they need lots of work and investments. Kuwait also have very aggressive targets, reaching 10% by 2030. Oman also 10% by 2020. When we go to Qatar and Bahrain, also up to 5% by 2020. And these are very aggressive targets. And that would really change the way that we operate our systems. Another development happening right here in Abu Dhabi is the establishment or the startup of the first nuclear power plant in the GCC. It's the Baraka nuclear power plant. It's going to be, a plant of 4 units, each of 1,400 megawatts. Of course, these will be designed for steady or base load output, because this is for the stability of the nuclear reaction. The largest unit on the GCC interconnection grid today is 660 megawatts, so it will be a big jump going to 1,400 megawatts overnight. We expect, as per the plan, that next year, 2017, we'll have the first unit, and then the other units will be commissioned 1 year afterwards. Now, the question is what to do with the extra output during minimum load periods. We'll have more than 5,000 megawatts of nuclear power And as you know, we have big variation between day and night here. So what do we do with the extra power since we cannot cycle the nuclear power plant? So that brings up the need for grid flexibility. From one side, we have the solar and wind energy, which is intermittent resources. You have the nuclear power, which is base load, and you cannot vary it. And that brings the need for flexibility. From the other side, we have prospects for interconnections. We already have the GCC interconnection operating. There's a need for flexible grids, and also, of course, we have a need for energy storage. Now, the sources for grid flexibility, they vary. I take this from a report from the National Renewable Energy Laboratory in USA. There are system operations and markets. Changes to system operations practices and introducing of markets allows the dispatch of power during these times to other regions, for instance. And that would be guided by the economic signals. Flexible generation, whether you have conventional power plant, dispatchable renewable generation, like biomass or geothermal, that would provide a little bit of flexibility if they have the ability to rapidly ramp up and down according to need. Then flexible transmission networks, of course, one of them is interconnections also, and having some flexible technologies that can allow this kind of control, and storage technologies like pumped hydro and thermal storage, batteries, and other forms of storage. And that would provide lots of flexibility where storage can have a high capital cost in some cases, and we have to really study the options that will give us the best combination here. Of course, the rationale of that is that we can store the energy when we have during the nighttime, or when we have lower requirement, and we can produce it during daytime so that we can shave off our peak. I'm sorry, I didn't put the reference for this graph because this is not mine. This is the main concept of storage that we need to apply here. And for us, this makes a lot of sense because we have a big variation between day and night, and we have big variation between summer and winter in terms of the peaks and the minimums. The costs are a very important issue when it comes to options, and this one is taken also from a paper from the same center. It's called Flexibility in 21st Century Power System. They have compared all the different options for flexibility in power systems. And sorry, I don't have a pointer, but you can see in the column before, in the last column, I think you would see the different types of storage, where you have thermal storage, you have pumped hydro storage, and you have chemical storage. These are all varying in terms of the cost. Of course, this is a very generic comparison, but the cost will vary according to the specific system requirement in each member. I emphasize the pumped hydro energy storage as one thing that we are considering here in the GCC. I know some of the GCC member states are considering that and studying that, whether it's something that can be used on the mountains or other technologies that we might be hearing about in this session later. But pumped hydro technology can deliver high energy storage capacity and the magnitudes in hundreds of megawatts, and this gives it a little bit of advantage over other means, which are usually limited in that type of storage levels. And for us here in the GCC, because of the large system and because of what we expect as a large penetration of grid-connected renewables, different from Europe when you have distributed renewables. So here it will make more sense to have high levels of storage than you have in Europe. The pumped hydro technology can be considered for the GCC, but of course the cost aspect will have to be considered. and compared to other options. Upcoming trends in the GCC, I think electric vehicles is one very interesting part of the industry. It's developing everywhere. I think here in the GCC we have a high dependency on cars in GCC. We don't have such elaborate transport systems like what you have in Europe, so we are relying highly on cars. Last week, the subsidies on fuel has been almost lifted here in the GCC, so there's a hike of about 60% on fuel prices, and that really puts a little bit of issue in terms of the cost of transport and whether there are other options to consider. So electric cars becomes more viable now to be considered in the GCC for storage and for utilization for transport. As a conclusion, we see that the GCC power sector is undergoing a major transition towards interconnectivity and more sustainability, as you've seen from the big targets that are being set by the GCC member states. So there is a need to increase the level of interconnectivity within and beyond GCC, and we are studying, the interconnection with other regions, as I said. Energy storage technologies then will be needed to introduce much needed flexibility in the GCC power grids, and we have to have suitable energy storage technologies, and they should be evaluated to make sure that they are suitable for our own conditions and have technical and commercial viability here in the GCC. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Al Ibrahim, for your very interesting presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, so we had our two first speakers of today. So first we had a presentation of the INGRID project by Mr. Bertoncini, who presented this interesting model, also in terms of business case. And secondly, we had the views and the perspectives from the GCC, the Gulf Cooperation Council, and how storage is necessary and needed to secure flexibility in the system. I would like to ask if at this stage you have any question you'd like to raise to the two speakers, so that then we can move forward. So please raise your hand, and if you don't mind, please identify who you are before asking the question. There is one person in front, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Tahir Diab, Senior Director of Strategy at the Dubai Supreme Council of Energy. Thank you so much for informative presentations. I direct this question to Mr. Al Ibrahim. Part of the work that we do with the Supreme Council of Energy is we plan for the energy mix for Dubai, and I think you've shared some of the ambitious targets that Dubai is seeking, especially on renewables, is actually now more than 15%. We've actually just revised it recently, and we're shooting for 25%. And we're doing a lot of baseline work to make sure that that can be attainable. My question is, I've been involved with this energy strategy in Dubai since inception back in 2011. And, we really don't have much involvement with of course, we know a lot about the GCC interconnectivity and the grid that has been completed now. But the perception that we get, and I'd like to hear back from you, I think you're the right person to answer this, is there's just really no feed into this grid. Because if there was something substantiated, we in Dubai, as we plan for our strategy 2030, would love to have a big portion of our power to come from import, in this case from the GCC grid. I know and I think this is probably correct, that Qatar, for example, runs a spare capacity of around 40% or so versus their installed. So what are the reasons that we don't see really active exchange of power or feeding into this grid, let alone your vision to really be able to even connect with the outside the GCC regions? And excuse me for being so blunt, but we would love to hear from you, really, what are the barriers and why we're not using this grid to the maximum?
Okay. Let's talk about, specifically, you asked about Dubai. First of all, Dubai is interconnected to the Gulf through Abu Dhabi, through the Emirates national grid. So there is prospects of Dubai even exchanging power, but it has to be through the Abu Dhabi grid, because this is how physically we are connected. From the Emirates, you know, Adwiya has been the signatory of our power exchange and trading agreement, which is basically the framework that we set for exchanges of electricity, whether it's on emergency basis or on commercial basis. So connectivity is one reason. The second reason that, you know, so far all the GCC member states have been operating in an isolated mode. And 5 or 6 years is not enough just to change things over. There is a little bit of awareness, there's a little bit of acknowledgement of the new situation that has to change. We in the GCCIA are having lots of activity in this regard, in terms of having forums to discuss these issues and to set up certain action plans to try to promote more utilization of the interconnector on commercial basis. So far, I've shown, maybe you have noticed in the slide that I've shown, although we are exchanging more than 900,000 megawatt hours each year, but these are what we call unscheduled exchanges, which is basically to support each other in the case of emergencies or loss of power stations and things like that. But what we would like to see is to have a really commercially based exchanges to really utilize this interconnector. So far, we have achieved savings to the member states because of you know, the reduction of reserve requirement, the reduction of investment levels for building power stations, and that still is not what we really have in mind. For instance, last year, 2014, we have achieved 214 million of savings to the member states. But the potential for savings is much more. It's more than $1 billion a year if we really use this interconnector on a commercial basis. And that's why we need to address all the obstacles that are there to reach that. One of the obstacles, which we have discussed last month in a forum here in Abu Dhabi, is the effect of subsidies on the real price of electricity. Because what happens is that actually when member states calculate the cost of their electricity and they're having the fuel at subsidized price, it looks to be cheap actually. So when you go and try to buy something from another country, they will not be exporting their subsidies to you, so they will give you market price. And when you compare that, you would see, you know, that it doesn't make sense for you to buy it. But the actual value of the energy, which we have done studies on, shows that there are lots of opportunities to save, and that we have calculated to be around $26 billion over 25 years. And these are the savings that can be achieved. However, we need to get everybody aboard, but we need to resolve this issue of this fake level of pricing that is being perceived by the member states and go to realistic and real costs of electricity. And that is what we are trying to achieve through our discussions with the member states.
And I think I agree with you on that. And I think now, since a lot of the countries have moved, the GCC countries, to reduce their subsidy, I mean, Dubai being cost reflective anyway, we don't even have a subsidy except maybe for a minor portion of the population. And we're a net importer. And as you know, a lot of the gas that comes in is, as you said, is favorable prices. And a small part of it is really linked to the spot LNG market. But now that we're moving towards more of, you know, hopefully getting a real value for the cost, the big picture is if we consolidate all the efforts rather than building plants and adding more plants and more capacity, as you said, the potential is huge to actually be able to feed in, especially with the countries that have an installed capacity with a good margin of reserve. So thank you anyway for this clarification.
Yeah, I think this is the best time to achieve this, because although the low oil prices have a negative effect on the incomes of the GCC member states, this is the best time to try to level off things and to try to benchmark real price of of fuel to what we are using. If we can use the market pricing in our costing, and now it is very close to the subsidy level that we are having, I think this is the best time to employ this change.
Thank you very much. I can take one more question. Perhaps person on the back, yes, please. And then we move to the second session.
Sorry for being so long in my answer.
We'll catch up afterwards.
My name is Abdul Majid Ibrahim from Dubai Silicon Oasis Authority. I noticed in the graphs which were presented that there was some power interchange between the different grids in the years before 2011 and until 2011. It was showing a rising pattern. Then it dropped. All the graphs were not representing what you wanted to show. I was wondering when you were presenting why there was some promising or increasing rate of power interchange, then it slowed down. This is my question. And one thing I understand, maybe not very accurate, that all the GCC countries have the same climate conditions, the same power requirement patterns. So it is the summer daytime, it is the peak, it is the winter night where there is no need, and it is the same all across the GCC countries. So where are the possible times for intergrid changing? This is, I think, the real challenge. Maybe this is part of an answer to the question why there is not much activities across the integrated grids, because we all have the same condition, the same time for peak, and the same time for extra powers. Please.
First of all, when it comes to the graphs, these are actual figures actually there. So I don't know whether we can put back that graph. But anyway, the yellow columns which you saw, this is the unscheduled exchanges. And you can see in 2010 and 2011, because in 2010 we only had 4 members connected. We didn't have Oman and we didn't have the United Arab Emirates. And we had some, 2010 and 2011, there were low levels of exchange during that time. But once we went to 2011, we had 6 member states, and then the member states started to rely even more on the interconnector. So you can see the big jump that happened in 2011, and then every year we are having more exchanges as unscheduled exchanges. But when you look at the red columns, which you saw maybe in 2010, we had only around 300 megawatt hours of exchange. And in 2011, I think we had around 43,000 megawatt hours. And these were actual power trade transactions. These are power trade deals that happened between the member states in these 2 years. And this happened because of perceived shortages in generation. But the next 3 years, all the GCC member states had enough generation, so there was no shortage. So these are the causes for this. When you come to your second question, this is really the common perception that we in the GCC countries have exactly the same peak, we have exactly the same load curve, but frankly, when we superimpose the load curves of the 6 member states, it's quite different. So you will find, windows and gaps between the peaks and between the member states that allow for these kind of electricity exchanges on economic basis. Not only that, because of the different energy mix and the generation mix between the member states, the cost of generation at different countries at the same time is quite big, actually. So there is a prospect, even during these times, to import power from other systems, which will cost you less than your own power, even if you have enough power. And there are enough extra capacities in these systems to provide you with a few hundred megawatts of extra capacity. So this is the study that we have done, and it showed that there is actually windows of opportunity that exist from time to time because of the difference in the shape of the load curves and the difference of times of the peaks.
Well, I was hoping that I was
suggest-
wrong,
Sorry,
and
can I suggest
I
that you
tend to be
follow up in
wrong.
bilateral afterwards, because otherwise we run out of time. I'm sorry.
I'm done.
Ah,
I
okay.
just made a comment. I was hoping I was wrong, and I was wrong. So there is good window of opportunities in.
Okay, thank you very much. Please join me in thanking our speakers of this first session, and thank you very much. We'll proceed with the section 2. I'd like to call